Hello and welcome to Season 3, Episode 8. My name is Tom. This is the Enthusiasm Project, and today we're going to talk about the fact that it ain't ever going to be perfect, so just jump in and get going. And the reason for that is because I have been fortunate enough to get quite a few super nice messages from people, and a lot of those messages are kind of the best thing I could ever think of receiving, which is people saying that either through like podcasts or videos or something, it gave them the push that they needed to get started and begin working on the thing that they wanted to create, which is so unbelievably exciting to me. And the flip side to that is I also understand, we've talked about this many times, and that was a very weird sound that I made, but starting to come up with the idea for like the quote-unquote Enthusiasm Project back in 2010, 2011, and not doing anything with it until 2017, I fully understand and empathize with the idea of, I just need to wait until blank, or it just needs to be this way, or it needs to be exactly perfect, or if I had more time, or if I need this idea, or all the excuses to just not get started with something, whether it's something like a YouTube channel, a podcast, a blog, whatever, something that you're creating, that you're putting out into the world, and for whatever reason, there are excuses to wait rather than get started right now. And because of that, I basically figured, you know what? If in any way I can use an episode of this podcast or multiple episodes to be motivating, or at least like the butt kick that you need, because that was a big thing for me, was even after starting my YouTube channel, so it took whatever that was, 6 years or something to actually start the channel, and then I like sort of haphazardly made a handful of videos, didn't really know what I was doing. What I wanted to do, what was in my brain, was I wanted to make a lot of videos and just be really like, firing on all cylinders with that project. And I was kind of just scared to do it because it sort of felt new, it felt different, scary, all the different things. And that was around the time that I met Heather, and she was the one who just told me, it's super cool that you want to do this, and you should be doing this, and there's nothing wrong with it, and it's exciting, and it's fun, and it's valid for a million different reasons. And that wasn't like, it wasn't like she gave me some tool that I didn't have before, but it was just having somebody tell me that like, yes, this is the thing. It's totally cool to do this, and you should definitely do it, was the butt kick that I need. So if I can return that favor to anybody in any way, I would love to do that. So I wanted to address an issue. I can't remember if I mentioned this story on this podcast or not, but I belong to a couple like Facebook groups about like people with YouTube channels, and they're kind of cool because you just sort of see what other creators are, I don't want to say struggling with, but just sort of the thought process behind, hey, how do you handle this? How do I do this? Any input with this? What kind of equipment for blah, blah, blah? And it can be kind of interesting. And there was somebody a couple months ago in one of the groups who was like, I want to start, but I have all these ideas and they're going to be really good, but I just can't get my audio to sound good, and this is the equipment that I'm using. And I remember writing a reply and was like, oh, you know what? Like, I have some of that same equipment. This is what you can do, and it's going to look and sound great. And then he wrote back, and he's like, yeah, but the space that I'm in right now is like, it's not going to sound really good, and yada yada. And I was like, oh, well, if you do this, that, and the other thing, it's going to help improve the sound. Plus, the fact that you're just using an external microphone is going to make it sound good. Don't worry, you can always improve as time goes on. And he was just like, yeah, but then there's people at home, and I don't know. And I think his channel was about outdoorsy stuff, or he wanted it to be about like outdoorsy stuff. And I was like, well, if your topic is outdoors, you can actually just film outdoors. Like, you can go find kind of a secluded spot on a trail or something, and you can film there. And even if you have some background noise, it's going to fit in because you're talking about being outdoors. And then he was like, yeah, but it's like the weather is really unpredictable. And what I realized was, no matter what, if I said, oh, here's the key to a fully functioning studio with everything you could possibly need, he would still find a reason not to do it. And I think a lot of people get into that mindset of all the reasons you can't do it, all the reasons you're not ready. You want to start a podcast, but you don't have the Rodecaster Pro. You want to start a YouTube channel, but you need this camera, you need this light, you need this blah, 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 blah. And there is some truth to that, which I've talked about before in previous episodes where, it drives me crazy when I make a video about the Rodecaster Pro that I use for my podcasts, and someone will always leave a comment that's like, I really love everything that this does, and it seems awesome, but I don't have $600. Like, what can I get for $100? And my thought process is always, if there was something for 1/6 the price that does everything this does, why wouldn't I have just gotten that? Like, I don't want to spend money, so I would clearly go for the least expensive option that works. But if you want everything that this thing does, then you do just need to invest in this thing. But the bigger question is, do you actually need that right now? Do you need 4 channels and sound effects and onboard recording, or do you just need something that records and you have your phone, you have your computer? You can get a relatively inexpensive microphone to connect to your computer or your phone and record good quality audio that way. You might even already have something at home that will totally work. So, it's kind of, there are times when to get the results that you specifically want, you do need to make that investment. But for the most part, especially when just starting out, the equipment does not need to stand in the way, because you just need to get the reps in of creating the thing. And I can't remember. This is the problem with now recording several podcasts a week, is I can't remember which stories I've told on which podcasts. But if you've heard this before, I apologize. There was the story I've told on one of them about working at my last job, getting our first drone. It was a DJI Phantom 2, which had absolutely no sensors of any kind. It was just it was like a really powerful drone, but you could just fly it into the wall. More modern drones, they have all kinds of sensors. So if they come near a wall, they'll stop. They won't go near a person. They won't go too high, too low. You can fly them indoors and they're super stable. This one was just kind of chaos. You just crash it all over the place. And we ordered it. It came in months later, and it was during one of my break periods at school. I was trying to figure out how I was reading the manual and trying to figure out how to turn it off. And I had a big open classroom, so I was just trying to turn on the motors, turn off the motors. I wasn't even trying to fly it. And the teacher from next door came over and was like, "Oh, can I see that?" And just grabbed the remote and just, flew it and, bounced around. Nothing happened. He kind of crashed into our green screen a little bit, but it didn't really hurt anything. And I remember he handed the remote back to me and he was like, "Sometimes you just got to jump in." And that was a very eye-opening thing, which is why that story sticks with me, because I was just going to sit there and read the manual forever, which sometimes you need to do that, sure, there's times to do that, but there's also times when no matter how much more you read or research or plan and prepare, you're not going to advance anymore. You do just need to jump in, see how it goes, and you're going to bump around. It's going to be a little sloppy maybe, but that's fine. It doesn't hurt anything. And the bigger reason that this popped into my head was I was rewatching for the first time in 4 years my favorite movie, which is pure cinematic gold, and that's the 1995 Academy Award not nominated film Tommy Boy with Chris Farley and David Spade. I have seen that movie more than any other. I over 100 times in my life. I've seen that more than anything, which is crazy because I know it's just it's not a high point in cinema, but I just love that friggin' movie. And I haven't seen it in 4 years. And finally I started started watching it the other day. And it's crazy because after even not seeing it for that long, I know every line from every character in that movie. I can just recite the movie in my head as it's playing, even though I haven't heard it or seen it in so many years. So if you don't remember Tommy Boy, how could you forget in the first place? But if for some reason you forgot this monumental piece of cinematic history, it's Chris Farley and David Spade. It's a Saturday Night Live produced movie, and basically it's an odd couple buddy film where it's a road trip movie. Chris Farley's dad dies. He has to save his business by going on a cross country sales trip, and David Spade is the begrudging sidekick that has to kind of babysit him, and they have adventures and learn life lessons along the way. And I just love that freaking movie. It's just so good. Just in case you forgot, or you forgot how whatever. I'm going to play you a clip from one of the scenes just because, yeah. So this is one of the scenes. It's a pretty well-known scene. It's where Chris Farley is in a diner and he's explaining to a waitress why he feels that he is not a good salesman.
Let me tell you why I suck as a salesman. Let's say I go into some guy's office. Let's say he's even remotely interested in buying something. Well, then I get all excited. I'm like, Jojo, the idiot circus boy with a pretty new pet. The pet is my possible sale. Oh, my pretty little pet. I love you. So I stroke it, and I pet it, and I massage it. Yeah, I love it. I love my little naughty pet. You're naughty. And then I take my naughty pet, and I go... Oh! I killed it! I killed my sale! That's when I blow it. That's when people like us have got to forge ahead, Helen. Am I right? God, you're sick.
I just love that movie. But anyway, so the reason that I hadn't watched it is because I'm super lazy and I only have the DVD of it, which brings me comfort because I know, like, I always have that. It doesn't matter if, like, it drops from a streaming service. But the movie has not been on a streaming service in, like, forever. I feel like it was on Netflix ages ago, and now it's not available on anything. And so I just didn't watch it because I'm too lazy to, like, connect a DVD player to the TV. Who has physical media anymore, you know? And what I finally did was I went to, like, the iTunes streaming store and found Tommy Boy, and it was $8 to just buy the digital copy, which also includes 2 hours of, like, deleted scenes and bloopers and little mini documentaries about it for $8. Like, come on. I can't believe that I didn't just buy that, and then it's just available all the time. So I downloaded it, and I was watching some of the behind-the-scenes stuff because I never, even though it's my favorite movie, I had never looked into really anything about the behind the scenes. I just had watched the movie so many times, and it came out when I was 10 years old. So, you know, I didn't think so much about that stuff the first time I saw it. It just, whatever. Usually I'll read all about trivia and behind the scenes stuff of every movie, but I didn't do it for that one. And I finally was watching some of the behind the scenes stuff, and it was so interesting because they were talking about kind of how haphazardly the movie was made. And it basically, they started filming it when they had something like 66 pages written, which, you know, there was like a vague outline by the time they hired like the director and the actors, and they had a release date, but they didn't even have like the movie, like the script done or anything, just a kind of an outline. And then it was written into like 66 pages, which was like the first third of the movie. And that's when they started filming without the rest of the movie being there. And it just sort of, they had a release date, they had an end date they had to have, and it was just kind of coming together. And the crazier part in terms of scheduling was that they filmed the movie, I guess, in Toronto, or most of it. And Chris Farley and David Spade were both on Saturday Night Live at the time. And they were filming that while filming the movie. So their schedule was to do Saturday Night Live on Saturday night and then go to that after party that they have every week, fly from New York back to Toronto like early Sunday morning, work on the movie for, you know, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, fly back to New York for Wednesday so they could start reading through their SNL scripts for the week, fly back to Toronto Wednesday night, film on Thursday, fly back to New York for Friday and Saturday to do the show, and then just keep doing that, which is, what an insanely grueling schedule. But what the director and the writers were saying was it kind of worked for them because the actors would leave for a couple days in the middle, and that's when they could like restructure things, rewrite things, and then when they came back, they had more of their ducks in a row, basically. And there was just not enough time for them to second guess anything. It wasn't like, you know, especially I think it's something that happens when people write comedy is you write a joke and it's funny, and then you hear it and it's funny, and then you hear that joke for the 100th time and it's not funny anymore, so then you just want to get rid of it. And then you forget that, like, oh, that was actually really good, but I just got bored of it, but the audience wouldn't be bored of it. And there was no time for any of that kind of second guessing because it was just like, we have to get this done now. And they compared it to, like, just how Saturday Night Live works, which is that show has to go on Saturday night. And sometimes it's good and sometimes it's not, but it has to get done. Everything has to come together at that time, no matter what. And that was the same situation they were in with that movie. Like, it had to come together at that time, no matter what. And so they just had to jump in and get it done without second guessing things. And obviously, I guess if I were talking about something like Schindler's List being made that way, it'd be maybe a stronger argument. But I think Tommy Boy is a really fun movie. It's a really, it's a super enjoyable movie. It has a ton of classic moments that even if the movie doesn't get the recognition it deserves, I feel they kind of live on, in pop culture or references or whatever. And that was done without people overthinking it. It was just people doing the best they can with what they got at the time that they had to do it. And I really loved learning that, because it was crazy that this thing that has been so influential in my life kind of was made out of the philosophy that I have come to embrace over the past half decade, which is just sort of jump in and get going. And I know there's sort of this, I guess you could call it a cliche, maybe a trite expression that you find all over especially the film and video YouTube community, which is done is better than perfect. I think it originated with Peter McKinnon, and then people just sort of adopted it, and it just kind of went crazy. And that is a good idea. Just getting the thing done is better than waiting for it to be perfect and never doing anything. Because I definitely understand, I want to start something, I want to make it. I want it to be absolutely perfect, and I can't release it or share it until it's exactly how I want it, and then the thing will just never get done. So get it 90% of the way there and just turn it in. But that's not necessarily the best advice, because in the wrong hands, you would find people who just create constant garbage, but they're well, it's done, so it's better than being perfect. I was yeah, but it is still terrible. So I think that only works when you do have high standards. There are certain people where, I'm going to use Heather's brother as an example. He's been, on her channel a few times. I'd love to have him on this podcast. He is an unbelievably creative guy. He's worked with Disney Imagineering and all these other entertainment companies, and he's in his free time right now he's learning to build a neural network and artificial intelligence program. Just crazy guy. And then he makes stuff and he's always well, I don't think it's good enough, and it's completely incredible, by the way. So he's one of those people where if you asked him to do something and he was okay, I can't make it as good as I'd like to, it's only going to be 85% my effort, no matter what, it's going to be amazing. It just might not be the thing that's going to be the front of his portfolio, but that's okay. It's still going to be incredible. It's still going to be done. It's still going to let him move on to the next thing. And I think if you're at that point where you just have those standards, it doesn't matter. Say you're making a YouTube channel, you don't have the perfect camera, the perfect lens, perfect lights, whatever, but you have the content, you have the message, you can share that clearly and succinctly in a way. That's the only thing that really matters. It doesn't have to be the most perfect, video in the world. And then you can just improve as time goes on. I love gear and I have a ton of it, but that was also collected over many, many years, and a lot of it before I had a YouTube channel or anything. So it's not I need to start a YouTube channel. Let me completely bankrupt myself buying equipment and stuff. It's sort of let's start here. Let's see what I need for my workflow, and then upgrade as my needs become apparent. Something hey, maybe I should get a dedicated video light. Okay, I'll do that. And maybe because of the way I need it to be, that light needs to be a certain size or of a certain brightness, so that way it is bright enough for what I need it to be. Okay, well, that means it's going to need to be, this kind. Your needs will just sort of become more apparent. I need a microphone that's going to pick up sound coming from me and kind of reject the echo from the room as much as possible. Okay, that's going to direct me somewhere. I do a lot of filming of myself, so having a camera with a flip out screen, that's important. Okay, your whatever your specific needs are, they just become more apparent as time goes on, and you can just sort of invest when that happens. But you don't have to have everything in place before you get started. And that's kind of one of the things with this podcast, this very podcast that you're listening to right now, is I wish I could cite this source, but I read an article that was talking about podcasts, and it said the average podcast burns out after 7 episodes. So on average, a podcast will make it to 7 episodes and then stop. And so if you have a podcast and you get to episode 8, you are above average. And that makes me happy, because even though I sort of messed with the number scheming thing, we're in this is episode 8, And then there's 2121, so that's 42. This is 50? Is this the 50th episode? Hey, there we go. And that's just literally from diving in and getting started. The first few episodes were just the stuff that I had. An audio recorder from 2012, the microphone I used to make my videos, like nothing dedicated for podcast equipment. The Rodecaster and the pod mics and all that stuff didn't come until later when it made sense for my workflow. But just sort of jumping in and getting started and knowing that it's going to be rough around the edges, but then an audience like builds around it and a community builds around it, and you start getting that feedback and you start realizing that despite any imperfections, you are making a connection with people in a really meaningful way that makes them, that actually has a positive impact on what they're doing, and then they can go and do the same thing for other people. And to me, that is way more valuable than just, having to have the absolute perfect production quality. So this podcast for me has always been that example of every time I press the record button, it's definitely before I'm ready to hit record. I always sit here and I kind of like look at some notes and think about, and it's like, okay, how do I want to talk about this? And then I just push the button, and I don't want to have to re-record anything. So that just means we have to go and make it work. And to me, that the ability and the willingness to do that is almost like a superpower, because so many people stop themselves from ever pushing the button. And so if you can push through, no pun intended, and do that, it really does kind of automatically put you into a different realm that so many people will just never get to because they get stuck in the, the conceptualism purgatory where they never advance from that. Even the podcast that I started with Peter Lindgren, which is not a shameless plug, but it's a podcast with Peter and Tom on all the things. Brilliant name. I was talking about road stuff in a lot of my videos, shocking, I know. And Peter just sent me a message and he was like, we should do a podcast. And I was like, okay. And then literally like the next week we were recording a podcast. We didn't really spend a ton of time. We knew each other a little bit prior to that, but we didn't spend a ton of time like, okay, well, what's it going to be about? And what's the art going to be? And let's have our 15 episode ideas and yada, yada, yada. It was just sort of like, let's do a podcast about this. Oh, okay. How should we do it? Oh, you record on your end, I'll record on my end. Okay, we're done. Like it just sort of jumped into it. And I know that that's something Peter has said is a personality trait of his, is to just sort of be spontaneous. I'm not as spontaneous by nature, but when it comes to this stuff, I knew that like, if I said, yeah, sure, let's revisit that next month and let's think about it, or let's come up with let's come up with the first season and how could each episode connect? And that's great. Like there's nothing wrong with having that strategy. But in this case, our thing never would have gotten made. And now we're on episode 8. So we beat the stats. And it was just by jumping in and doing it. And I made an episode a while ago that was called My YouTube Regrets, which my number one YouTube regret was not getting started sooner. So I could talk about, all kinds of different lessons that I've learned in that journey or podcasting journey. But the only regret is not getting started sooner. Every time I talk to people about, I want to start a podcast, but I feel it's so saturated, or I want to do this, but I'm not sure, I need it to be perfect. I just think I am so glad that I, for whatever reason, chose to jump in, for podcast. It was beginning of 2019. I was completely not ready. I had no real idea what I was doing, but I'm so glad that I did that, because now 50 episodes later, it let me get to a point where I really love doing this, and there's people who seem to get value from it, which is awesome. And that wouldn't have happened if it just didn't get started. My YouTube channel, which is, now like a significant source of income on the side, plus a huge part of my life in terms of time and planning, plus a big part of just community building and letting me connect with other people. And it's a massive, resume piece and portfolio piece. That wouldn't have happened if Heather didn't just kick me in the butt to go like, yeah, you should totally do this. And it's, it's completely okay to just get started. And my only regret is not getting started sooner. And that's kind of the thing. Like, it's just never going to be perfect. There's never going to be a perfect time. The only thing you can do is just jump in now before you're ready. And it actually reminds me, so we talked about movies, let's talk about music for a second. It actually reminds me of Green Day, which is a band that I very much enjoy. but I'm sure you've heard of the American Idiot album, which came out in like 2004 and then was also like a Broadway musical somehow. But that album was huge when it came out. Like every song on that was just like massive. I mean, that Green Day was a very popular band prior to that, but that catapulted them into this level that was just sort of unfathomable before, unthinkable before. And I don't know if you've ever heard the story of that album, because I think that it's very interesting and it sort of fits in line with the theme here. So you've got this band. They've been around at that time for, 15 years, something like that, 20 years? No, 15-ish. They've been around for a long time, so they know what they're doing. They're good at what they do. They know how to create good albums. They know how to write good songs. So they have that experience, and now it comes time to write a new album, to create a new album. And so they wrote all the songs, they wrote all the music, they recorded the album, and then basically the story is that the master recording was stolen or somehow disappeared. So they had finished this album, and essentially all work on that album just vanished, which sucks because they had spent so much time on it, years, like writing and recording and all the planning, and then it all just disappears. And obviously they were pretty devastated, but from interviews that I've heard, basically what they said was, okay, we could re-record that. We know the songs, we could just do it again. And they didn't, because they just felt that the songs were like good and, they were fine. It was good. But they decided to just start from scratch super quick and just make a new album. And the new album was the American Idiot album, which is easily their most successful album. And that was done with so little planning, so little preparation, and the results were so far beyond what they ever could have thought. I love that example of, I think we've all been in a position where you're working on something and the file gets corrupted or it gets deleted or you lose it and you're just like, oh, I have to start over. Or it's like, could you just do something new from scratch? And again, we're talking about experienced musicians, very good performers. They are doing something really quickly and really rushed, but they do have a level of competency that's going to guarantee it's, at worst, it's going to be okay. And at best, it was, the best album of their career. But I just find it ironic that the album that they spent so much time trying to plan and stress over never even saw the light of day because it basically disappeared, while the album that they then just kind of rushed and did really, really quickly is, their most famous piece of work. And I think that that's just another real world example of why it can be a good idea to just sort of not overthink things and just dive in and go with what feels best in that moment when it comes to what you're creating. And it is funny because that also carries over to YouTube for what I have noticed tend to be my most successful videos, because they're the videos that you plan for and you work really, really hard on, and they're the videos that you just sort of throw together. And it seems like for me, and in pretty anecdotal but vast experience talking to other people, it's sort of the same thing. The ones that you just throw together tend to be the ones that do the best. And it's sort of frustrating, but in a way it makes sense, because obviously while you were making that, you were much more in the moment and not up in your head. For example, I have a video that 2 years ago, I took a trip to Iceland and Switzerland and New York and all these great things. And part of it, the reason I went was to just do photos. I just wanted to go to these places I'd never been that were super gorgeous. I live in the desert. Iceland was a very nice opposite location to that in the summertime. And I wanted to sort of make a video that documented my journey of this trip and these places, and trying to learn how to do good photos and stuff in there. And I filmed all this great footage and I took all these great photos, and I spent a couple of weeks editing together this video that I am still incredibly proud of. It's 15 minutes long. There's a really nice voiceover. It's a great video, and that video's been up for 2 years, and it has 1,500 views, which 1,500 views is fine, but that is, I mean, obviously the trip is still wonderful. I didn't go on a trip to get views on YouTube or anything, but my point is, it's this thing that I worked really hard on, and technically the budget behind that video was insane, and it did not perform that well, especially considering how long it's been up. Where on the other hand, maybe a month later, I made a video. I had gotten a new Apple Watch. Like, it was when the Apple Watch 4 came out. And so I got the watch, and the day I got it, I was just like, oh, I wonder how much faster this is than my old one, because I had the original Apple Watch, which was starting to get really, really slow. And I was like, oh, I'll make a video. And so I did a little speed test video where it's like the watches side by side. I'm kind of running through the different applications and the different things and seeing how fast they are compared to one another. And that video, literally from the time I had the idea of like, oh, I can make a video about that, this was before I kind of like decided to focus more on camera stuff specifically. But anyway, the time from coming up with the idea for the video to the time that the video was uploaded to YouTube was under 2 hours. And that video is still like one of my top 5 most viewed videos on the channel. It was the first time I've ever had a video like go semi-viral, where typically my videos were getting maybe within the first week of uploading them, maybe like 50 to 100 views at that time. My channel had like 1,700 subscribers, I think. And this video was getting 10,000 views a day. It was just a totally different, like a different thing. And it took 2 hours. You know, it was a video I didn't even, I was actually making a different video. I was doing like a day in the life of me as a teacher video when the watch got delivered. And in the end of that video, I say like, oh, I should make a video about this. And then I made that video also. And, you know, it just went bonkers. Obviously, there is kind of a difference, because the Apple Watch video was just a little like, I know why that was popular at the time. There's not a lot of like emotional investment in that. Whereas I'm much more proud of my Iceland video, even though it's one of the lower viewed videos on my channel overall. But I guess that like that part of the story almost negates my point. So just pretend that I make sense. But what I'm trying to say is that when you aren't overthinking things, or sometimes when you just do what feels natural and jump into it, that's the thing that is going to resonate with other people. Because I think there's some part of you as a person that can sense that can sort of sense that like authenticity of this person is in the moment. They're just kind of doing this thing. It doesn't feel as manufactured. And so by jumping into something before you're ready, you kind of take advantage of that thing. And it's almost like an innate instinctive thing that people are just sort of born with. But I'm not against planning stuff out. I love planning. I pride myself on being a planner and being prepared. It brings me so much joy whenever something happens and Heather's like, oh no, this thing, or I need whatever, and I can pull out like the exact specific weird tool to fix whatever the problem is. It brings me immense joy. I love being prepared, but you can definitely be over prepared. And that's where I think a lot of people get stuck with their creative endeavors, is just in the preparation and the planning and the conceptualization phase, and they never move into the production phase. And if you just go head first, jump in, foot first, whatever, make a splash, you might absolutely make some mistakes, and you're probably going to. But I have learned that I think that that's much better than never getting started. I would rather, at this point, jump in, try things out, make some mistakes, and have to adjust. And then by the time I do all that, I'm so far ahead because I've already gotten going, rather than waiting till like I know exactly how everything needs to be completely perfect. Obviously, if you're talking about something like brain surgery or being an airline pilot or whatever, please take the time to plan and prepare and do everything right and double check everything. If you're an astronaut, which, by the way, it has always bothered me that NASA, okay, if the Russians can call their people who go into space cosmonauts, why can't NASA call its people who go into space nastronauts? It bothers me that they like miss that opportunity. But if you're an astronaut or an astronaut, part of what you do is like redundancy. It's all about planning and preparation for every scenario and having a backup plan for your backup plan for your backup plan. And that's how it needs to be. If you're making a podcast or a YouTube channel or something that is significantly lower stakes than leaving the Earth's atmosphere, maybe you don't need to plan as if you are an astronaut. But I guess the last part to kind of dive into would be where the motivation is coming from, because it's almost like this is going to be a weird analogy, but it's almost like when you deal with someone who has like a drug or alcohol problem. They can't get better unless they want to. All the loving friends and family in the world can try to convince them and try to help and do all that, but it's never going to stick until they have an intrinsic motivation to do that. And I think that kind of becomes, that idea is very important because it's kind of about why you're doing something. Like, I know that I can be very guilty of seeing, if I listen to a bunch of very highly produced podcasts, like stuff like Serial and Reply All and NPR podcasts where there's interviews and editing and there's just so much work and research and storytelling that goes into it, I'll think like, man, I would love to do something like that. And I would. It would be a really fun project. But I also then know like the amount of time and work and energy that goes into that is something that I don't have right now. And as much as I might want to do something like that, it's a project that for me would get stuck in stagnation because the motivation really comes more from, it's really cool that they're doing that. I'd like to do that too, but it's not coming from the real internal place of I have some kind of true drive to do this. Like if you're making a YouTube channel, I've had friends who have, they have their like camera tech channel or whatever because they like cameras and they like that stuff and they see other people doing it and doing pretty well, but it's actually not the thing they're super interested in. And it takes them, sometimes a year or two before they decide, I actually don't want to make like camera tutorials. I want to talk about this entirely different subject. And they struggle the whole time they're doing the camera videos because they don't know how to approach it. They're comparing themselves to other people. They're trying to, get their plan going. So their schedule's inconsistent, their quality's inconsistent. And then once they find the motivation for the thing that they're actually excited about sharing and the reason that they actually want to do the thing, it all kind of takes care of itself because they're so excited. They're just so excited for it. I was going to say, it's almost like, if somebody told me, hey, Tom, go give an hour-long speech about astrophysics. I have a very minimal understanding of it, and I could talk about a few concepts that I've heard about or read about that I think are cool, and then I don't know what I would do with the other 56 minutes. And I could try to kind of plow my way through, and I could also kind of like prepare and try to like, okay, I can learn about this, and I can memorize this, and blah, blah, blah. But that's going to be not a very enjoyable process. And I might be able to get through that 1 hour long talk, but I'm sure not going to be able to do many, many more after that. But if you told me, hey, Tom, go on stage and talk about the Aquabats for an hour, talk about The Simpsons for an hour, talk about cameras for an hour, like I would completely overrun the time without any preparation. And that's because there's that intrinsic interest, excitement, enthusiasm, so to speak, that I want to project to the audience. And it just comes naturally. And that's where the motivation comes from. So it's a weird thing to be like, you're doing a creative endeavor out of obligation. But I've definitely known people who just sort of feel like they have, like, I guess I should have a podcast. Do you actually want one? Because if you don't, then you don't have to. Like, you really don't have to. It's almost like when a new social media platform comes out. I oftentimes see and hear people start to freak out about like, oh, I was just feeling like I got a handle on my YouTube channel and now this other thing is out there and how do I do that? And it's like, you just ignore it. You just don't. Easy. You don't have to. If you're really excited about it and you want to be a part of the new thing, by all means, like dive in and figure it out. But if you're forcing yourself to do it, that probably means there's something there's something missing, I guess I should say, in terms of your motivation. And that's really going to limit your ability to be successful and to be sustainable, because any of these kinds of creative endeavors really hinge on sustainability and consistency, the ability to do them for a long time. If you make, 3 YouTube videos, that's awesome. And it's an accomplishment to make 3 videos, but your channel's probably not going to grow. It's like nothing is really going to happen with those 3 videos. You need to make 3 more and 3 more and 3 more and then have 30 videos. I mean, using myself as an example, by the time I finished my 30-day upload challenge, around the time I started my channel, that Heather kind of pushed me to do 30 videos in 30 days. And I had 5 or 6 videos on my channel before that. So that means I ended the 30-day challenge with about 36 videos on my channel, and I had like 28 subscribers. So I definitely had more videos than subscribers on the channel. And you kind of think like 36 videos, and of course they're not all perfect, but I thought most of them were pretty darn good. And they still are good, but nobody was there to watch them. Nobody knew that they were there, and that's not going to happen until you start creating more of a library of work for people to find and for people to connect with. And that's what's going to kind of help things grow. So what is the thing that you actually want to do that is sustainable in that way? And sometimes it might be something you want to do, but the topic just runs out. Like, I've heard podcasts on different subjects. I won't be specific, but where you listen to it and it's so engaging, and you listen to 3 or 4 episodes. Maybe it's a lot of like more of like the self-helpy type things. And after you listen to like 8 or 9 episodes, you start to realize they're kind of repeating themselves. And then the podcast, feels like it drags itself out for another like 3 years. And it's not because they're doing anything wrong, but it's like the topic itself just doesn't have a lot to cover. So you've covered it and then recovered it. And now what? Now it's just more of the same. So, struggling to find that thing is a normal part of the process. What is the thing that brings out that internal motivation for you? That is something that there's enough to work with, enough to make videos about, enough to make episodes of podcasts about, whatever it is that you're working on. And then are you then going to be able to do that consistently? And I think that if you have the motivation and you're excited about it, and the topic itself lends itself to being, broad enough to dive into over an extended period of time, the consistency part does oftentimes take care of itself, as long as that is a priority for you and that you're the one that makes that decision. But once that's literally why the word enthusiasm means so much to me, because it is sort of like a magic, I was like a pill, but like you can't just eat enthusiasm, but it's like a magical thing, because no matter what the thing is you're doing, as soon as you feel a sense of enthusiasm for it, it just kind of becomes easy to try. That 30-day upload challenge that I talked about, 30 videos in 30 days while working a full-time job, is an insanely difficult thing to do. But I was so excited about, like, I had wanted to start a YouTube channel for so long, and I finally had started one. I had somebody, Heather, who was in my corner, like, pushing me along, and I really, really wanted to do this. I was really having fun doing it. I was seeing progress with every video that I uploaded, and that, like, cultivated that enthusiasm, which made it easy to get up early on those mornings to film and edit, to stay up late on those nights to film and edit, to do all those, when I would normally be exhausted from a day of work, to then rally and pull together to create an entire video with the rest of my time. It became, I don't want to say easy, but easier, because that innate enthusiasm was there just kind of right from the beginning. And I know I've used my drum set as an example before, but I'm going to use it again because it's a very prominent one. It's a loud example in my mind, but it's also because the drums are always like right next to me when I'm recording. So you can hear them. I wanted a drum set when I was 10 years old, was when I first wanted a drum set. And it was a very, like, I would sit there and like draw sketches, very bad sketches of like a drum set. And I thought about playing the drum. I just wanted to play the drums so much. And this, of course, is way before the world of YouTube or the internet or anything, where you could go like look up more about it and look up pictures and easily order things or whatever. So it was just sort of like in my mind, this is what the drums are. I just really wanted to play the drums. And I got my drum set when I turned 30. So that's 20 years later. I got the actual drum set. There was a time in high school I bought like a very inexpensive drum set, and I was really excited about that, but I lived in an apartment. So, I mean, I think I never really learned to play it because I couldn't. I had to play it so quietly and so tiny. My apartment was, the room that I film my videos in now is just kind of a normal size room. But my bedroom in that apartment in high school with a drum set was a good, like 2/3 the size of this room. and it also had to have function as a bedroom. The room I'm in right now does not have to function as a bedroom. So there just wasn't room for it. It was too loud. There was a physical drum set there, but I could never actually play it. And I was always sad about that. And then later on in my like mid-20s, I had a nicer apartment, and I did buy an electric drum set, which I thought was really cool. But even that, being in an apartment, the sounds of the sticks hitting the pads was still like too disruptive for neighbors, and it just didn't work in the apartment, and it was kind of a bummer. In fact, it was almost like a little more annoying, because when you play a regular drum set, the drums at least make their drum sounds. When you're playing an electric drum set and you can't hear the sounds that it's making because you're just a bystander or a neighbor or something, you just hear like the same like hit, 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 hit sound of like drumstick on, plastic. And it's actually kind of unpleasant, even if it's not super loud. So it wasn't until there was a house and space and, then I could get the drum set. But the reason that always sticks out in my mind is because drums are expensive, and it's like, I'm 30 years old. Do I really need to like spend hundreds of dollars or more and try to like learn a brand new instrument right now? And my thought was, yes, because it's been 20 years and this little itch has not gone away of like wanting to play the drums. And clearly it's probably not going to go away. So at some point, on a very philosophical level, at some point I won't be able to play the drums. Like I will be old or injured or incapable of moving and physically like moving in the way that's going to let me play this instrument. And then I just will never be able to do it, because that's it. Also, if I've been wanting to play this thing for 20 years, it stands to reason that in 4 more years, 10 more years, I'd still want to learn how to play the drums. So I could get them now at 30, figure it out, and then by the time I'm 35 or 40, I'll have 5 or 10 years of drumming experience, instead of being 35 or 40 and still going like, I guess I should. Maybe I could get a drum set, and having 0 years of drumming experience. And that's what I did. I just found, I didn't know much about, I knew very little, I guess I should say, about drums and drum hardware. I bought the best thing I could afford. I remember the day that it got delivered, it took me 2 hours just to unbox everything, because it's like all the hardware and all the drums themselves and the cymbals and everything, and then figuring out how to like attach the pedal to this and set up the hi-hat, and then how to position the things where it takes a long time to set up a drum set, especially when you're brand new to it. But I'm glad that I just jumped in. And then of course I sat behind the set and I played terribly because I had no idea really what I was doing. Like I knew some of the basics, but I had none of the coordination, none of the limb independence that you just need to practice through repetition and through getting those reps in. And that's the exact same thing for any other creative endeavor, is you need to get your reps in. So to kind of wrap up this episode, I really just want to emphasize to anybody who might be listening that if you have some creative endeavor that's been in the back of your mind, and there's just that little urge to like me with the drums, I really should get a drum set. I should start a YouTube channel. A podcast would be cool. Whatever that little thing is that just hasn't gone away. It's been there for more than, a couple days. It just keeps coming back. This thing you want to do, this little urge. I would say, don't wait, just create. That'll be on a t-shirt. I feel like I completely killed the point that I was saying there, but just jump in, because no matter how prepared or unprepared you are right now, time is going to continue to pass. And in 6 months or a year or more, you could be 6 months or a year or more experienced in your thing. Think of how much you could create, how many videos, how many episodes of a podcast, how much better you could get on camera or behind the microphone or editing or doing whatever the thing is that you want to do, because you've been putting in the reps for that time, instead of just sitting out on the sidelines and thinking, I guess I should, maybe I couldn't, maybe I need to be ready, or things need to be exactly perfect before I can get started. And if you notice, I didn't talk about anything to do with money or monetization or earning an income or any of that kind of stuff, because that's not even what we're talking about right now. We're talking about pursuing a creative endeavor because of the personal fulfillment that it brings you and nothing else, because that's the thing that's going to keep you going. I did not realize how passionate I was about this topic. So I feel like I'm at the I feel like I'm running the risk of just repeating myself by just trying to urge people to get going. So rather than me taking more time and repeating myself, you should just go out and make the thing. Sign up for the channel, register the URL, press the record button, whatever the thing is, you should go do that like right now. And then you should also leave me a voice message and let me know how it goes, or send me an example. And then I will see you in the next episode. So thank you for spending your time with me. Now I hope you use other time to go make a thing. Good luck, have fun, and I will see you next time.